This is Open Research Institute Projects Meetup for the 12th of August, 2025. We talk about what we did, what we're doing, if we have any roadblocks, or if we need any resources. And well, we have had a busy week or so, and I'm going to go ahead and start off, and then we'll let other people take the floor as they join or as they are. So the first sort of big ticket item this past week was the final meeting of the 2024-2025 term of the United States Federal Communications Commission Technological Advisory Council. This is a volunteer citizen advisory council to the FCC. It's composed of organizations. Most of them are industry or commercial companies, but there are some nonprofit, non-commercial, and academic folks on the council. We're one of those open source nonprofits. It's a quarterly meeting, usually. The last one that we had was back in December 2024, and we had one this past week in Washington, D.C. It's at the FCC headquarters, which is super fun. The recording of the entire meeting with all three working groups presenting their slide presentations and also giving either advisements or recommendations. That recording of the whole thing is available at the FCC website. ORI participated on the Dynamic Spectrum Sharing Working Group, and we participated directly in a charter item 2. So the working groups get charter items from the FCC, things that we're supposed to look at, questions that we're supposed to answer. Item number 2 has 2 parts. How will spectrum sharing models adapt and evolve to meet the growing demand for spectrum access among various services to support multiple purposes? So it kind of gets right at the heart of spectrum sharing. And it's, how will the models adapt and evolve in the future? FCC is always looking to this question in order to figure out how to adapt and change the spectrum sharing model. So not necessarily the mechanisms or the individual rules, but the overall strategy. So backing up a bit and then looking at like the baseline assumptions, things like that. And the second part of the charter was how can terrestrial and satellite services, the interplay between them, be complemented in sharing models to promote more efficient spectrum use, because we see growing number of situations where terrestrial and satellite services want to use the same spectrum. So that was our particular part of all of that TAC work. What we did is we wrote down a bunch of things. So we did essentially a white paper. We had several subject matter experts come in to the TAC and talk about spectrum management. And our consensus was there's 3 distinct eras of spectrum management. They're outlined here on the slide. You have the kind of first era, mostly unregulated. The loudest station wins. So it's not really first come, first served. It's loudest served. No real regulatory oversight. And this way of kind of managing the spectrum or observing it really is considered to have collapsed following the Titanic disaster. This was a North Atlantic congestion issue. The Titanic didn't cause it, but was probably the most famous sign or symptom of overcrowding on the bands, unregulated. Now, from about 1927 all the way up to 1981, we had a command and control model, centralized FCC authority, there were static allocations, and it was based on the public interest. This changed somewhere in between 1981 and 1993. It evolved into the current regulatory model that we find ourselves in now, which is considered a market-based or flexible use model. We had the introduction of spectrum auctions and flexible licensing. So this is now showing some signs of overload and crisis, hence the emphasis on dynamic spectrum sharing and trying to figure out a new model. So not just mechanisms, but a new model. So we submitted some evidence of current crisis, and we used amateur radio as at least one of the examples, the 219 megahertz band limbo. We also cited the C-band aviation disputes. some very well publicized interagency conflicts and resistance to reallocation. So we're starting to see like a resistance to, gosh, well, we can't continue to reallocate or change because, well, there's no space, no room. So all of these things we cited in our written work. These are is a list of recommendations. You know, this is what we came up with or helped come up with in the for the working group. The working group submitted had 10 different charter items, number 1 through 10, and some of those had multiple parts like this one. So it took 2 years, but we got through the vast majority of them. In general, we're just kind of saying, please use look at the places where regulatory sandboxes have been successful. Let's do more of that. And we had some specific advice on how to figure out to share between terrestrial and satellite. There's some really good examples out there. They sound like common sense to a lot of us, but when you have to write them down and be a little more organized and systematic about it, you can see that it's tricky on how you write it down. Okay, so that was a lot. Besides the meeting itself and all of the work, to do the recommendations is one thing, to write a paper, which is not required, to write a white paper, or to have other advisements. That's the work of the working group and the official meeting. We also had a lot of other conversations. It's pretty clear that open source telecommunications and specifically Open RAN or Open Radio Access Network, that is considered more and more to be responsible for speeding up adoption and deployment of 5G cellular and is expected to help 6G in the same way. So this is a huge success for open protocols, open APIs, open radio access networks. It's a big deal. And this was widely acknowledged during the meeting. Open source, it's obvious to the people that were there that open source gives experiences that directly translate to personal and professional development. There's a growing appreciation for open source work contributing towards the workforce and helping the government figure things out. If you take it seriously and if you do a good job in your open source work, industry and government will too. Not every open source project is a serious project that needs to rise to the level of infrastructure deployment, and that is totally okay. And our next major AI ML or artificial intelligence machine learning project at ORI will most likely be with WSPR and with ARL folks collaborating.